So my presentation is covering Hachichi tattoos. I chose this topic because I think it's kind of an obscure topic that many people don't really know about, even some um, Okinawans now or people from Okinawan descent. So I wanted to kind of bring awareness to a tradition that's kind of become obscure and started to die out. So first I wanted to have people think about their own personal lives and I was wondering if anybody has tattoos. And if you do have a tattoo, I want you to think about why did you get your tattoo? Or if you don't have one, why would you get one if you did? Would it be for fun or because they look cool or would you get your tattoo or did you get your tattoo because of a life milestone? Um, or does it or does it symbolize something that you support? And then, so now that you thought about why you got your tattoo, I want you to imagine somebody told you that your tattoo is uncivilized or that it's ugly and you are a barbarian because you have them. And then also imagine you're trying to move to a different country, but you can't because you have tattoos. This is how people or women from the Ryukyu Islands felt because of their tattoos on their hands, and those are called Hachichi tattoos, which I'm going to talk about today. So I found this. There's a legend of Hachichi tattoos. It starts off with this princess named Kikoe Ogini, who is the Noro and the highest religious official of the Ryukyu kingdom. And then one day, the Noro and her party took a boat trip and were caught in a storm. And then some fishermen from the island of Satsuma saw the boat and rescued the Noro and her party and are brought before the chief lord of the Satsuma clan. The chief lord of the clan kind of took a liking to the Noro because of her beauty and grace, and therefore he would not let her leave despite the Noro's pleadings to return to Shuri Castle where she was needed. And then one day, a high official from Shuri Castle came to Satsuma for diplomatic reasons, and the Noro managed to arrange a meeting with the official, and together they formed a plan to help the Noro escape. A few hours later, the Noro received a package containing needles and blue dye. She then began creating tattoos on the back of her hands. And then after this, the Noro asked the chief lord to see her. And then when the chief lord saw her tattoos, he left the room. And a couple days later, the Noro received word that a ship would be provided for her and her party could return home. When she returned home, other ladies at Shuri Castle also began to tattoo the backs of their hands to protect themselves from harm. Women also began to place tattoos on their hands to symbolize their social status and where they lived. So although this is only a legend, it kind of does provide some insight into Hachichi tattoos and its background and the significance to the Ryukyus. And so therefore, my main purpose of this presentation is to highlight the now obscured tradition of Hachichi tattoos and how they played a significant role in Okinawan life. And then I think this demonstrates the importance of reviving and discussing this aspect of Okinawan culture. So although the exact date of when Hachichi tattoos came about is unknown, my research found that it kind of started somewhere in the 16th century, and mainly or only women wore Hachichi tattoos from the Ryukyu Islands, and each island had a different style of Hachichi. For example, the islands of Yaeyama, Okinawa, Miyako, and Amami all had different styles of tattoos, and Okinawa and Amami called the Hachichi tattoos Hachichi, and then Miyako called them Pizuki. I think that's how you pronounce it. People who gave tattoos were called Hajichi. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but they're often a paid professional or a close family friend who would do them. And then the needle was a sharpened bamboo stick, and the ink was charcoal base mixed with traditional aomori, which we saw Caitlin and drink in their video recently. And from my research, it states that the origin of Hajichi tattoos comes from different countries in Southeast and East Asia, such as Taiwan, Samoa, Palau, the Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia, and Borneo, possibly because of the trade relations between the Ryukyu Islands and these countries. Um, Moving on, here's some pictures of Hachichi tattoos on this top over here. The woman's hands with some designs, and then down here, this black and white picture kind of shows the different designs that each island had. And then Hachichi tattoos kind of had different meanings and purposes. So first that I found was social status. So I found that the more Hachichi tattoos you have, the more higher class you are. And then if you're in the higher class, you would often have more refined and dainty tattoos, like thinner lines, while those who are in the lower class kind of have thick lines and bolder markings. And then women would also get tattoos based on their milestones and age. So their first one would be when they were about 7 to 10 years old. And then they would get the next one when they come of age, which is between 12 to 13. And then women would continue to get tattoos to signify the important moments in their life, such as when they got married or had their first child, or even when they turned 60 years old. I couldn't find why 60 years old was an important milestone, but yeah, that's something to look into more in the future. Women also got the Hachiji tattoos for religious and spiritual reasons. Like in the legend I mentioned earlier, women would get them for protection so that they wouldn't be kidnapped by foreigners, mostly because foreigners thought that the tattoos are kind of ugly and barbaric. And then getting a tattoo also meant that you were spiritually clean. And if you had one, you would go to heaven. If not, you would not be going to heaven. So like I mentioned before, the tattoos kind of had different meanings. So the first one that I found was the arrowhead tattoo, which is on the fingers over here. It means to never come back, which kind of symbolizes an arrow that was shot out of a bow and that never returns to the person who shot it. Similar to a daughter who marries out of the house and the family hopes that they don't come back and they stay married to that family. There's also the plus and X symbols, which in Miyako, they are meant for protection. I also found circle and square designs, which meant circle meant winding thread, and then the square was like a sewing box. And the reason for these was because women weren't allowed to marry unless they knew how to sew. So I guess having those symbolized you knew how to sew, and it kind of showed everybody that you were ready for marriage, I guess. And then additional markings that I couldn't find like the meanings to, but they include like lines on the fingers and crosses, dots, and flowers. And then there's also stars. And I found one article that said that the star patterns possibly follow the constellations that the Hajichi saw in the night sky, and they just put them on the hands. And although tattoos did have the meanings, even like nowadays, people get tattoos for like certain important moments in their life, but they also get tattoos for aesthetic purposes, which is what some women did when they got their hachijis as well. And then when hachijis got banned in Okinawa during the Meiji Restoration in the 19th century, the Japanese made it criminal to get or receive a tattoo. And this is possibly because of the bad stigma of tattoos in Japan, because it was related to the Yakuza or like the Japanese gangs. And I found another article that stated that possibly they banned the tattoos to kind of lessen the power that women had in Okinawa, because higher up women would have more tattoos, and then kind of making those tattoos moot took away their power in a sense. And then as a result of this ban, the Okinawan women were seen as barbarians to Japan. Japanese were ashamed of Okinawans because of their tattoos, and they kind of didn't want the Western world to see how quote unquote barbaric these Okinawan women were. And therefore, these women couldn't travel abroad because of their tattoos, and some were forcibly deported when they tried to um, immigrate to different countries. And then so lots of women started to wear black gloves to hide their tattoos. And then even when the ban was lifted in 1948, lots of the women who did have Hachichi tattoos had passed away, and the tradition of the tattoos was kind of not known anymore. But nowadays, there's lots of youth who are trying to reconnect to their indigenous roots. One person is Lee Tonouchi, and they were raised in Ryukyu or they were born in Ryukyu and raised in Hawaii, and they wanted to explore and demonstrate the history and beauty of Hachiji through their children's book, Okinawan Princess: The Legend of Hachichi Tattoos. So they basically kind of talk about the legend that I mentioned in the beginning. It also talks about how you don't have to be physically, or like beauty doesn't matter like on your physical appearance, and it's more on like your heart and how you actually are. So that art the author kind of combined the two concepts together. And then the book is also written in Pidgin, which is the indigenous language of Hawaii, and Uchinaguchi, which is the language in Okinawa, and Japanese as well. I thought it was super interesting. So if you guys want to read it, it's at the UH library. Not right now because I have it, but when I return it, you can go and borrow it if you want to. The pictures are really pretty too. And in conclusion, I think although many of us in this class are not from Okinawan descent or from Okinawa, it's still important to learn about these aspects of Okinawan culture, and then we can use our knowledge to recognize the hardships that the Okinawan women went through, and but we can also celebrate and respect the culture of Okinawa as we learn more about their traditions, and especially as we were dancing some Okinawan. It's important. I think it's important to learn more about the culture as well and the background of the of Okinawan dance. Yes. Okay. And then resources. And thank you.